When we had to do a first really major reorganization and also, reduction in force, like I was pretty, it felt so traumatic, I guess. I do this. Oh, sorry, I should warn you. I
Oh, no
can't.
worries.
It's
Yeah.
also something I've learned as a leader. I used to like hate this and I'd try to hide it, but then I had actually no control over it. So,
Yeah.
um,
1, 2, 3, 4.
I'm Lucy Robinson, and this is Behind the Fruit, brought to you by LCR, the executive search firm for the global fresh produce industry. At LCR, we've spent years working with the leaders who shape this industry. We connect fresh produce executives worldwide, so growers, marketers, and CEOs alike. Each episode, I sit down with these leaders to discover how they built their businesses and teams, and really what they do differently. By following and subscribing, you'll be helping us bring even bigger guests and more stories. So let's get into it. Jenny Du built Apeel from scratch with her co-founders, starting out in a garage after university. In this episode, she talks about the hardest moment in that journey, having to lay off people that she had personally hired. It's an emotional conversation about the side of leadership people don't often talk about. We also talk about the dinner that turned into a pitch, building a science-led company from an idea, and what it takes to lead through crisis when your company becomes the target of a coordinated online disinformation campaign. Welcome to Behind the Fruit podcast. Today, I'm really pleased to be joined by Jenny Du. Jenny is the co-founder of Apeel Sciences. Jenny, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Lucy. It's nice to chat with you.
Thank you. And so, Jenny, really to start with, I think it'd be great for you to give a bit of an introduction. So if you can introduce yourself and maybe Apeel Sciences as well, just more of a top line overview to really set the scene.
Sure. I have the great pleasure of being employee number 2, a co-founder at Apeel Sciences. And we're really we could consider ourselves like an agricultural technology supply chain innovation company that's focused on bringing forward plant-based solutions as well as digitizing the supply chain, focused on the fresh produce supply chain to try to reduce waste, kind of bring forward more efficiencies.
Amazing. Okay, cool. And yeah, we'll definitely obviously get into a lot more detail around that because I know it's something you're super passionate about and want to talk around, in terms of the environmental impact, etc. But I think before we do that, before we get into Apeel as a company, I'd really love to understand a bit more about you from a personal perspective. So who Jenny Du is. So if you can maybe take us back, so talk to us about your background, where you grew up, what drew you into chemistry as well, and just really what you were doing before Apeel came into the picture.
Yeah. So I am a Canadian, born and raised in Canada, and has a background in like engineering chemistry, which is this blend of chemical engineering and chemistry. And I also pursued a PhD in chemistry, mainly because I'm just like, I think a big nerd. I just really love and kind of why chemistry to your question. It was like, I remember being in high school and the topic of the periodic table was introduced, and I was like, wait a minute, there's this beautiful, almost like a little bit of order to the universe. What these atoms are, what their properties are, how those sort of relate in these like trends across it. And I felt like, wow, by just understanding some of that, maybe fundamental science, that suddenly these patterns maybe could reveal themselves as to materials and their behaviors all around us. So that's kind of why chemistry sparked my interest. I was really just surprised by that. I just remember viscerally like feeling that in class as a high school student for the first time. And then, as a kind of first generation or sort of first of our generation born in Canada, and really the first ones to go to any kind of post-secondary education, I was really fortunate to have high school teachers because I was like, what do I do if I like this? I had no idea. I really had no foundation to understand that. So really benefited from educators and mentors like that along the way.
Where did
Pursu
you study as well?
Say that
Did
again?
you study in Canada, or did you go to you did study?
Yeah. Yeah, so I did my bachelor's degree and my PhD are in Canada. Um, but then I was actually looking while I was in graduate school, I'd come across a totally different area of study. So it's kind of focusing on one space, and that was these like remote sensing for, let's say, pollution in remote areas, kind of like a groundwater detection type of like devices that could do that, or materials that could help with that. And then I'd come across basically the field of flexible solar materials and really thinking about how to bring these low cost solar materials into the world. And that's what actually ultimately brought me to Santa Barbara, where I did postdoctoral research. And it's because that was a place where there was a high concentration of folks kind of working in this domain. But of course, you arrive and you've got some twists and turns. And my research advisor, the professor at UCSB, was like, actually, I've got a different project for you that's not at all related to the flexible solar materials. It's actually about generating energy from these microorganisms to make an electrical device called
Wow.
microbial fuel cells. And that didn't matter either, because then at the end of the day, what it helped was it brought me and the other, our founder of Apeel, James Rogers, and another co-founder, Louis Perez. It just brought us together. We were research research teammates in the same group at university. So and then here we are trying to start basically like a post-harvest technology company. So,
Yeah, I love
but it
that.
is probably the diversity of the exposure to different technical fields along the way that um to sort of start off from something that's just an idea on paper, and it's just yourselves at the beginning to kind of try to find a path. It probably helped to have maybe that diverse set of background to draw from, at least as a starting point.
Interesting. And I love the way that, that chemistry, you're sort of drawn into chemistry whilst you're at school even, because I mean, I just find it so interesting. I mean, that was not me at all. I was not interested in chemistry, but my son, he's only 9, but he's so interested. He asked me so many questions that I can't answer about the universe and how things work. And I could just totally see him being like, yeah, like a science geek as well, 100%. And it's great. So, at that age, just really, yeah, wanting to understand in depth how things are put together. So, yeah, no, I find that really interesting. And I'd love to then get to the idea of how Apeel came around. So I suppose, so you mentioned that the company's built around the idea of using plants to protect produce. So how did this problem find you initially? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I think it's something we all really take for granted, is like, how does food get from ultimately the field onto our plates? So it was back in 2012 when our founder had come across, just for the first time, like the food loss and waste statistics that are released by the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. And that's where, you know, hearing really that a third of the food that we produce worldwide is lost or wasted before it ever has a chance to be eaten. But yet you have like 800 million plus people, who really go to bed hungry every night. So there was this, um, just taking for granted again, how the abundance of options that we have at our tables. And so James had come across that and had been inspired by the just kind of again the research work that we do, and thought like there was a way to maybe translate the technical skills that we had sort of gained and the knowledge to trying to address this problem. So um, James and Lou kind of invited me out to dinner one day. We were just hanging out as friends, and meanwhile it was actually kind of a pitch, hey, I've got this idea. This is the thing that I'm kind of starting, or is this something you're interested in? And I think once you hear about the problem, that kind of global food waste and loss problem, it's something that you can't unhear. It kind of really stayed with me after that first conversation. And when you think about at least for me, like what did I what would I hope to put my energy towards? After sort of like being in school forever.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, like, a meaningful problem that if you could make a dent in that could really kind of, I would say, like, lift the quality of life for a lot of folks, and then also for us environmentally and health wise. Um, it's a technical challenge, so you'll also still have the ability to apply, your nerd skills towards something.
Yeah, yeah, was.
And how unique to have a chance to build that from scratch. So that's really, let's say, the macro problem and how we came across that. And while not being folks who come from a food or agriculture background, not even in our studies, honestly, but with fresh eyes, looking at this challenge and saying, is there something that could be done here? And really looking at how do plants protect themselves as the inspiration for what the solution could potentially be.
Mm. And so going back to that moment then, so you went to dinner, you didn't realise they were going to pitch, essentially, and they did. And obviously you were bought in, of course you were, like you said, it was something that you really thought about and couldn't forget about essentially with the bigger problem. So what was the idea at that time? How, yeah, when you look back at that time, what was the specific idea? What were you looking to build?
Yeah. So when we think about, and again, maybe the beginner's mindset was helpful here with no prior background in food and ag, we're sort of like, well, what causes plants to decay or spoil and break down? And so you learn that water loss or this evaporation constantly of water from the plants is one of those stressors. Oxidation, because we kind of forget that like fresh produce really is like it's living still. You've picked it off the tree, but it's actually like respiring, it's still using up its stores, and so there's like an oxidation that's happening as it's consuming its own energy to try to stay alive basically until it has a chance to be eaten. And also, biological stressors like pests. So just looking at the like water loss and the oxidation side, we asked ourselves, well, how do plants protect themselves, and what's kind of used today as a basis, of the current technology that allows us to even have fresh produce, year round today. And so really it was that all plants have a peel. Just in the same way that we have a skin that helps us retain moisture, protects us from an oxidative environment. Plants have this fruit has the same, vegetables have the same. Some might just be thinner, some might be thicker. But um and then looking at just what materials or the building blocks was of that of those peels, we asked ourselves, could by almost like repurposing that same material, applying it onto the surface of fresh produce to effectively reinforce or the existing natural peel, could we get benefits? So this is the name of the company really reflects
Mm.
this inspiration from the peels of fresh fruits and vegetables. And so, yeah, that was really you can think of it as like the initial hypothesis to try to move forward with. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super interested. And you started in your garage or somebody's garage, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So James, was renting a house here in Santa Barbara with another friend, and it was an upgrade from where he was as a student because it had a garage. And so then you had a little bit of room to like tinker around. So we had one half of the garage was kind of our tinkering space, and the other half of the garage was the roommate's tinkering space.
Nice, nice. And that's it. That's where you started.
Yeah.
Cool. So tell me more about Apeel now then. So if you can break down exactly what Apeel is today and maybe
Yeah.
what it isn't as well.
Yeah. Maybe let's start with what it isn't. So,
Okay.
touched on it, but I didn't have a chance to elaborate. It's kind of like, how is fresh produce's shelf life extended after harvest today? Well, we rely on a cold chain or refrigeration, but that is pretty energy intensive and infrastructure intensive. So, I think if you're maybe in a more developed market, you can maintain a cold chain from the farm or the field pretty much all the way into our homes, but that's really not true for a large percentage of the global population. And because it's just, expensive and energy intensive to try to stand up and maintain. Um, you have a kind of long legacy of like maybe post-harvest pesticide use, maybe wax use, for example. But waxes, we would say, are often applied maybe for shine. So it's an aesthetic appearance for the people. It's kind of like said and known that people shop with their eyes. So this kind of glossy, beautiful display may sort of draw folks in right away. So, but we find that they're not always that helpful in actually extending shelf life. And then you've got this maybe changing trends, right? Do you want sort of a petroleum based wax to be on your edible fruits and vegetables, or would you want maybe something else there that was more like the natural peel? And same thing with regards to really a large proliferation of like plastic packaging. And that's also there to do the same thing. It's to slow down moisture loss because you can kind of trap moisture, slow it down in the bag, reduce oxidation. But now you have this proliferation of the single use plastics. Um, there's other tricks that can also be played to modify like the atmosphere, the storage chamber. Um, it doesn't have the best connotation, but sometimes, gassing produce and that kind of thing. So, we kind of forget that like an apple harvest season in the northern hemisphere is like late summer, early fall, but yet somehow in the middle of spring you can still get apples from the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
region. It's because they really are stored under these modified atmospheres for so long that a single harvest can be let out over the course of the year. So it's strange to think that an apple in the late spring could be already 6 months old. It's not how we produce. So that's the existing ways in which fresh produce is protected after harvest today. And so what Apeel is, kind of going back to it, it is an edible coating. It's using the building blocks that are found in the peels, pulp, and seeds of fresh produce and plants that we already eat today. It's repurposing those building blocks on the surface of fresh fruits and vegetables to make this protective layer that can help retain moisture and reduce oxidation. What's really important is like it's food that we're already eating. It's in the peels that we're already eating today. And these ingredients are also used in other kinds of food products. So what while it is maybe a novel use case or a new application, these are long-standing molecules that are really known in sort of the food safety and the food science world. And anytime our bodies digest dietary fats and oils, they also make these same ingredients like in our gut as part of like a natural metabolism. So it's really wanting to use things that are found in nature and that our bodies can know what to do with, just sort of using them in a new way.
Okay. And which products do you typically work with, or maybe which products did you work with to begin with, and how has that portfolio expanded as well?
Yeah. So we first started, it was very unexpected. Again, it's we were looking for some feedstock material to use. Where would there be like a lot of maybe waste peel or pulp? And we ended up finding a local coffee grower, which is super strange. You don't think of like the central California area as coffee growing, but it is. And very sort of niche varietals. But when we talked to that grower, that farmer, he was like, "Wait a minute, what are you guys doing? What do you think this might like benefit?" And he's like, "I've got these finger limes and they could really use this technology." And we were like, "What is a finger lime?" Um,
Yeah.
so, and they're amazing. They're as they described, their shape is kind of like that, where they're like elongated and kind of like maybe your thumb or finger in length, but in that a width as well. And when you break them open, they have these like caviar beads basically on the inside. You can almost like just squeeze them out like, and then they sort of all pop and come out like this little set of beads. They're beautiful.
I've never seen them. Yeah, I don't know if you even get them in this country. I don't know, in the UK.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, yeah.
they might be native to like Australia or they grow really well there. But so this grower, he's like, you know, they're used often in maybe like restaurants. You can think of it as, a really nice fresh garnish on like a like oyster or something like that, or on a salad or something. And so he was like, I have to air freight these across the country because they won't make them there without the skin starting to just sort of break down, change color. So we were like, well, we don't know what a finger lime is, but this sounds interesting. So let's give it a try. And what was really helpful was that the decay of or the breakdown of a finger lime happens pretty fast. So you can kind of tell, if you were waiting on something like a butternut squash, maybe you could wait forever and you not see a change, because they're so robust, these root vegetables. But here you had something where under normal circumstances, within maybe half a week, you'd already see some deterioration. So um, by the time you sort of put the appeal protection on, we're like, wow, this can go out sort of like to 2 weeks and it still looks like the skin's really like healthy on that lime still. You break it open, it's still really juicy on the inside. The flavor's still really good. And so that was really the first time we felt like, oh my gosh, this could really work.
Nice.
So in a lab setting, we've been able to demonstrate that this concept is pretty universal, like this reinforcing of the existing natural peel with a protective edible layer to reduce moisture loss and reduce oxidation. Like that works because all fresh fruits and vegetables are subject to the same stress.
Hmm.
So we've shown in the lab its benefits on like berries and the ability to maintain like higher like vitamin C levels, for example, because it's not being cannibalized by the oxidation. Um, the tomatoes, for example, being able to also pick them almost like closer to ripeness and actually have them maintain the shelf life. Whereas today they get picked really hard and green, which is why they don't always taste very good when you buy them from the store. Um, but there's more
You'd
development.
apply the product before you harvest the tomatoes now, is that right? Or is that what you
Yeah,
mean?
you would actually just you'd let them stay on the vine for long,
Right.
more
Okay.
of the flavor to develop. And then when you harvest it, you have this protection that can be added that sort of makes up for picking it early so that it stayed hard, so it was transportable. And then, but where we focus today is on avocados and on citrus categories. So there's some more development work that's needed for some of the other categories like the berries and the tomatoes. But avocados, I don't know if you've had this experience where, first of all, they're not very cheap. They're pretty expensive on
No.
a per item basis, but you can you're sort of waiting for it to be good. It's
Yeah,
ripe,
yeah.
and then like the next day it's
Yeah.
like game over, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's a nightmare, isn't it, with avocado, just trying to get them right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Or you buy the ones in the store that are, say, ready to eat, ripe and ready to eat, and they are not. So, or they're
yeah,
already gone. You get them home and they're already gone. So yeah, it's a
that's right.
tough one
So
to get right.
anyways, that's an area where, just try to extend that perfect
Yeah.
ripeness window instead of a day or day and a half. You can take it to like 3 or 4 days, and suddenly everyone's got more time to use what they have in their homes. So, yeah, avocados and citrus is where you have the most experience with so far.
Nice, nice. But hopefully expanding across some other products over time by the sounds of it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Great. So let's go now to your regulatory journey. So how has appeal been evaluated and what did that process actually teach you?
yeah. Um, what it taught me was, uh, I have like tremendous respect for regulators. And I know, these days, not all this stuff gets a good rap, for lack of a better description. It's sort of like, oh, is everyone sort of shortcutting all this stuff? And you're like, no, I think if anyone actually sort of saw what's really needed to kind of clear these regulatory hurdles, I think you'd have an appreciation for like everything that's in your pantry. uh, so that's just, almost from like a consumer's like appreciation lens.
Mm,
But for us, what was helpful was that our ingredients, these like kind of like these fatty acid based materials, they're already in the food supply system, or they're already in the food supply. So there's already a body of evidence, like a history of safe consumption and use. And so we at least could more just talk about what was the new application of the ingredients and talk about how might that affect, let's say, dietary exposure for the consumer. But we didn't have to go and create a whole new body of food safety evidence because it's already there versus a totally novel food ingredient. If it had never been seen before, had never been in the supply chain before, you'd have to provide a lot of that body of work, for the first time. Um, but it's also, we appreciate that like every market, maybe there's a lot of harmonized requirements across markets. So, um, being able to speak to, let's say, like a regulator in Australia and New Zealand about, this technology and trying to get its regulatory approvals, similar to working in the European Union or the UK and elsewhere around the world. So I think that was very helpful, I think, to learn and some of the commonalities, but also, where there were maybe some unique differences in some of the expectations. A lot of that has to do with more like, well, we want to understand what this consumption would be for our population, and so instead of something that's just totally generalized. So those were some where the nuances came in. But I just have a tremendous appreciation for the it's really like not celebrated, not glamorous work of
Mhm.
regulators
Yeah.
and the regulatory and quality and compliance teams within companies in order to maintain really like a safe food supply.
And you've talked quite openly about resistance within the industry. So you mentioned before that Apeel have been the target of what you described as coordinated disinformation. So yeah, I mean, tell us a little bit more about that and how you actually then navigate leading a business in that
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah. I mean, really, we hope others don't have to go through this or can sort of learn from what we've done because it's just tremendously painful. But it's also kind of the new world, like with how digital media and campaigns can be run and how I would say like bots and other things can be leveraged to drive certain narratives. Like unsuspecting organizations can really be caught off guard. And these are tactics now or strategies and tactics that we see used for competitive gain almost across a variety of different fields, not just in our situation but in anything that's where there's like competition to be had. Um so I would say this disinformation campaign, it started as a like it was positioned as almost like a confusing thing. It was that this industrial cleaning agent that is from a UK-based company with the same name, Apeel. The safety data sheet for that cleaning agent was put up, but claimed to be our safety data sheet and said, "Wow, like you can't eat this. This is toxic. It's hazardous." And it's like, well, of course you wouldn't eat a industrial cleaning agent.
Yeah, yeah. Don't want- Yeah.
And some folks looked at it and they read this safety data sheet and they're like, wait, well, that's a different company's name and
Mm,
this isn't the same product. But that didn't almost like the truth didn't matter. It was sort of this, you know, the the original sort of rage of the original message really was carried forward and amplified and really like I would say like intentionally amplified again with like bot activity and other things to drive the narrative. It evolved from that. We were very fortunate to receive a Gates Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation grant very early on at the founding of the company. There's no equity, there's no ownership exchanged for it. It was a philanthropic grant, and it was to try to bring forward post-harvest solutions for food loss and waste in sub-Saharan Africa.
yeah, yeah.
But we got then turned into, unfortunately, like a a Bill Gates sort of negative association. There's some pockets of the population, that feel maybe that he's on a different kind of agenda, and anything that is associated with that is part of,
Mm,
this more nefarious scheme, and which of course is not, we don't know Bill. Bill doesn't know anything in us, and
yeah.
doesn't control anything that we do.
Gosh.
But so that's kind of how it started, um, and was just sort of fueled from there. But really, to the heart of your question around how do you navigate a business through this, I think we at the beginning we just thought, oh, like this must just be some organic like misunderstanding. Why don't we just sort of explain with facts, like, and this should go, this should be
Yeah, that
settled
it'll
then.
go away. Yeah,
And
yeah.
you're like, oh no, that's not it at all.
How long did
uh,
it go on for then? How long did it take you, from when it first started to being able to turn that around essentially?
yeah. It hit us for the first time about 3 years ago,
Right.
and right around that time a we had just launched sort of plastic-free cucumbers, in one of the markets, and, there was some really good momentum, happening for the company. So it really definitely sort of knocked us off our momentum there. Um, I mean, I think it regardless of, like, who's behind it, because I think that's maybe the most challenging part is it doesn't go away because it's being activated versus it is an organic misunderstanding that kind of comes and goes. Um, the we really our advice to I think anybody else is like, this is it's like a crisis situation. And so how do you take care of your customers, communicate with them more proactively, manage also the communications with your own team members and internally so that they understand what's going on. Because of course they would, be nervous about what this sort of means as like an impact on the business. And it's really hard to see like your hard, or honest work being sort of torn down by like internet trolls, basically. Not yeah, and not everyone's a troll, but some folks were maybe I think were misled by what was, like, put out there, and then they had a very honest, like, reaction to it, so, so
So it
and
sort of
then it was
spiraled in that sense then by people seeing it and then just they continued to troll and it went on from there.
yeah, yeah. So you gotta, take care of your customers, take care of your team, and then at the same time, like, be empathetic to those who've come across the disinformation and misinformation, um, and engage pretty empathetically to say, like, "Hey, I get why, food is a sensitive topic." Um, it's something then that what's being said about us is scary, but let us try to show you who we really are. And so I think we were slow to do that at the beginning because we just thought it was just so nuts that we were like, this is a huge misunderstanding, and once we just sort of explain it, it'll like go away. So I think that was, we would have in hindsight just responded very differently, much more quickly, and then be less worried about exactly where it was coming from because you may never know. I mean, you can do this. Fortunately, you can do these campaigns in a very anonymous, almost like a no fingerprints kind of way. So, and while that's happening, where you're worried about where it's coming from, you're losing time and ground with your key stakeholders and how to, kind of bring them back into the fold. So.
Sounds like a really difficult time. How can you describe how the sort of the impact it had on, the business, the team, and you personally as well?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, very damaging to the business, especially our US based business. Social media rules are different overseas. So bless you all for I think just stronger, I would say moderation and uh so it didn't catch fire in the same way, or it wasn't easy to propagate in Europe, for example. So our business fortunately there is still in good shape. But in the US we had um, consumers were basically encouraged to write in and call and demonstrate in person to protest the product. And it's like, But what no one's uh it's very tricky. It's like we went to market very differently than any other post-harvest
Mm,
technology would have. Like, we spoke to consumers. We have consumer facing, um, like, messaging, and we encourage the use of the Apeel logo and sticker on Apeel protected produce. Like, you can't name another wax company or some other post-harvest technology that does that, and yet they've been around for decades on your produce. So there's this whole sort of invisible industry that folks don't know. We didn't know until we were working in the space either. And so we show up on the scene as kinda, like, new and therefore a bit above the fray, and so it was like, wait, like, it was easy then to maybe direct attention, towards us and make ourselves a target. So in the US, that was unfortunately, a lot of the retailers were like, "Hey, we might have to stop the
oh
appeal
gosh.
treatments right now until this kind of, because it's easy if people are pressuring you to say, well, oh, like, we don't use it. We don't
Mm,
use it anymore. We're not using it now. So that's been, yeah, super difficult to overcome. And to your question around, like, how does that affect you personally?
mm,
Uh, it's hard not to feel, like, personally attacked, I guess.
yeah.
And it's just 'cause you know how honestly you've built this, and you know how hard you've worked to build it.
Mm,
And just, like, the rigor that has sort of gone in, and especially on, like a food safety side of things, and this very intentional selection of what the ingredients are, their purity, et cetera, how that process has also evolved over time to uphold both, food safety and environmental standards, really, and then to have a totally different narrative be overlaid, and and then I get it. It's like, some folks are the, intentional propagators of that message because they have something to gain from it. You have the original instigators themselves and whatever their motivation might be, but then you have others, like, I would call them, um, maybe they've got a health product themselves,
right.
and by maybe, pointing to something like Appeal and amplifying the fear-based messaging around it, funneling kind of more traffic to,
Mm,
their own business for their own gain. So we have, filed lawsuits, and there's been some recent press on this topic. So that was another thing. We were very slow to stand up for ourselves because we were sort of like trying to be nice about it. Like, it's just like, oh, this honest misunderstanding, like,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure it'll go away. And so we just let some folks be to get away with it maybe for a little bit too long before we took more formal measures to stand up for ourselves in what we've been doing. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's I don't wish this upon anybody,
No, it
really.
sounds horrific. It definitely makes me feel like, and I know all problems are, relevant to the individual, but it does make you think like the problems I've had are just, so much smaller than that. So it just sounds like an awful situation to go through. And I think that you are right though in people say business is not personal, but when it's something that you've developed from scratch, particularly when you've had a mission like you had, a reason to do it to make a positive impact on the world, and it's your baby. You work so hard essentially, don't you, to get things where it needs to be, and then to have it attacked like that is just, yeah, I just can't imagine. Do you
Yeah.
feel you have sort of come over that now? Are you sort of out the other side of it,
I would say,
essentially?
like, maybe neutralized, but I think once things are, like, in the internet, they can kind of continue to have at least some background festering. Because again, folks either get clickbait or whatever from using some of the headlines, as the tags
Mm,
or whatever. So I don't think it ever fully goes away, but I think, we've just done a better job of, telling our story and getting that out in front of people a lot more, and that's really an important part to the like, countering it. But, yeah, I mean, you have that toll on yourself, and it really comes from the impact you see on the business, the impact you see on your team members. Like imagine your quality control team that's literally doing the the work like every day to ensure the purity and safety of the product just getting torched. Like so
Yeah.
uh
Awful. It's awful.
yeah. Yeah. But it's something that um yeah, it's just we hope that our own case, I guess, is helpful for others to learn from, just so that how to be prepared and to
Mm.
respond, if other folks are hit with anything like that in the future.
How
Um,
would you I mean, what would you suggest in terms of like what if you were looking back now, what would you do differently? Sort of, and I suppose it's hard, isn't it? Because at the time you don't know. You act in that way because you
yeah.
don't know. But obviously, now you do know, you have that knowledge. Like what would you do differently?
Yeah. I think like us figuring out like sooner that it was intentional, but now you can understand what the markers would be to look for that. So,
Mm.
accounts that are sort of commenting, it's like, does it look like it's really even like a real human or account? um uh so one is sort of because I think that helps you decide, like, is this just sort of going to come and go as like a one shot issue, or is it, if it might be an intentional thing, then can it surge and can it be sustained? I would say at least you can spend some time trying to figure out who might have been behind it, but don't put all of your energy there, um, because you're losing the opportunity and you're losing valuable time in like getting your own message out. It's almost like regardless of where the origination has happened, you need to get out in front of your stakeholders, consumers, customers, your team, etc. The general public. Because otherwise, someone else is telling your story, and you don't have, like you're not at the table, right, to help provide a counterpoint to it. So
Yeah.
mhm, yeah,
Okay. No, well, thank you for sharing. And it is, yeah, I suppose it's always insightful, isn't it, to hear that? And I know you want to get your story and messaging out as well. I think what'd be great is to move on a little bit to more yourself as like a leader within the business. I'd love to talk a bit about that. So obviously your role has evolved, and grown massively with the business. So obviously initially from co-founder and now, leading a function across compliance, manufacturing, supply chain. So maybe tell us a little bit more about what you're doing right now, and then we can talk more about your how your roles change, leadership style. That would be great.
yeah,
But tell us about your role at the moment.
yeah. So the it's kind of been more on the external affairs side of things. So this this disinformation campaign had become more of a primary responsibility for me in recent times. So, so that does have a um, communications and a government relations and um, things that I was not expecting to do when I was thinking of myself in graduate school, in the chemistry department. Uh, but as far as how it's evolved over time, the trend has just always been like, well, what does the company like need right now? What problem do we have to solve? There's often multiple things that you're working to tackle, but um yeah, I'm like just like I'm maybe like a hyper generalist, I guess, and just motivated by, well, what needs to get done to get us to that next milestone. So, when we started, it was an idea on paper. So at that point, it was my job was we're literally like buying produce from the grocery store, trying to extract molecules from the peels like in our kitchen. And then at some point it was like, well, we can't work in the garage forever. We probably need a proper office and a lab. So then the next thing to do is go figure that out.
Mhm.
And then once you've got that kind of going and you're able to hire in some additional scientists and engineers, then the next thing became, our team was able to show like a proof of concept. Then you're like, well, we need regulatory approval. Can't just go slap on random substances
Yeah.
onto food. Good news. You can't just do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So you stand up a regulatory affairs function to figure out how to do that. And then you need more than 1 gram of material if you're ever going to,
Yes.
be in the marketplace. So suddenly that the supply chain function, and you need to wrap quality and compliance around. You want to deploy this solution into your customers' packing houses. And so suddenly there's a field support team and, maybe some equipment engineering to help you actually do the application in the pack houses. So like that's just been how it's kind of, and a new function just suddenly emerges, or a new department suddenly emerges. And, that lives here until it nurtured and mature enough that maybe it breaks out and it moves into someone else's purview, or if it's strong
Mm,
enough, it's like standing on its own. So things have, I guess, sort of come in and out of my scope at different times. And, so I wouldn't have bet on any of the communications things until, we
mm,
unfortunately hit with that. And then, so I think having a lot of the regulatory background, around the product, obviously it's product history, and all these things have maybe made me a good sort of spokesperson for the organization with certain stakeholders. And so a lot of these roles had evolved organically, but it's been a lot of fun. You get to learn something at every twist and turn. I never definitely didn't have the experience going into any of those functions and trying to build them from scratch. So a lot of
yeah.
it's just um, being willing to ask questions and wholly admit that you don't know anything. And so
Learn as
seeking
you go. Yeah.
advice of others, to just help shape, what's needed in that moment. And just focus on that for now. You don't have to get too far ahead of yourself as to, well, what is this going to become? And what does that mean for my career track? It's just more like, we want the business to succeed. So is this somewhere where we just have to roll our sleeves up and get involved to
Yeah.
move things along? Yeah.
Yeah. And just take it step by step by the sounds of it. And what about your leadership style? Would you say that if you look, back to when you first started leading a team to now, would you say that has, changed along the way? Have you adapted your style? Have you learned anything in particular about leadership that's changed that along the way?
Yeah. I think some things the same and some things notably different. So, I hope that my team members, and colleagues would describe me as, just very like people oriented, and, just wanting to help others succeed, hopefully seeing them as people. And, uh, so it's like, hey, what can I do to help you in your role? But also know that I know you deeply and personally. And then, um, and so there's just like, I don't know, there's like an intimacy, I guess, from that.
Yeah.
So that folks, like work is just, it's such a significant number of hours that you commit in like your lifetime.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
how can you show up somewhere, and actually sort of feel like not just the thing you're working on, but the people you were with, that's like a really a meaningful way to spend your days, So, so I think it goes beyond just the nature of the work itself. It is those relationships that you have at work to feel, both supported and seen. So that I hope that part hasn't changed, but has maybe improved even more over time, or deepened over time. I think the parts that have changed though, like early on, you are in a way, you even like through school and things, like you are successful or you are rewarded for being the person that like does the stuff. You are the doer, you have the answers, you're the one who's like leading the charge on the doing front. And then at some point, you have to learn to really like empower, enable others. And so I wouldn't call myself like a control freak, but there was just like maybe like a high degree of like hands-on involvement. And I think I needed to learn that like it was okay actually for me to step back, and in fact, preferred for me to create a little bit more distance so that others really had the opportunity to get more involved. And those were like growth opportunities for team members. So that was like it's just like weird because your whole identity and your definition of success was based on a set of behaviors almost as like an individual contributor. And then to lead really like through others and through kind of a broader span of influence is just a very different, um, it's a different world, I guess, or a different perspective. So, how to learn that was, uh, was important. Yeah.
I think I do think that, delegation and being able to delegate is a skill that a lot of people have to learn. I think particularly when it's your business as well and you're doing everything, it's then having the trust that your team are going to do it. But I also think it's super important. Like you can't do everything yourself forever, of course. Like you have to, like you say, enable them, teach them, and then trust them that they're going to do the job. But I also think it's something that not all leaders can do. You do hear a lot about micromanagers and the teams feel it. So yeah, I get that it's hard for people, but I do think it's important as well to be able to do that. Would you agree?
Yeah. And I think like, um, it's truly recognizing that you can't be the one with all of the ideas and the solutions. It's also
Yes.
very like it's a distorted reality if you think like you're the only one with good ideas. So I've definitely seen firsthand and really value that, you can put something kind of on the table for the group to consider, but how it then gains new shape, because others are lending their thinking to it. And you leave the room in a better spot, or you leave that discussion, better than how you came in, with things that you really wouldn't have contemplated yourself, but you take somebody with a different perspective and a different experience set that they're bringing to the table or to the conversation. And so, yeah, I think I really value like, it's more like, how do we get to all of the best information to inform something, and almost like as close to the objective truth sometimes about something that you can. So how to facilitate that really is as best as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's, a lot of the fun of it as well, engaging the team, get everybody's ideas, see what everyone thinks, talk it through. And I think particularly in the early days, it can be quite lonely when you're, founding a business, coming up with all of that yourself. It's nice to have people that are coming with new ideas, fresh perspectives, etc., to really help the business grow. And I think it's important as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And let's talk about as well, because I think, every founder has tough moments in the journey, whether it's professionally or personally. So I think it'd be good to understand yours, if there's been a particular moment that's maybe been really tough for you during the appeal journey. So if you can talk us, what that moment was and maybe how you found a way through it as well.
Yeah. The I think because Appeal's really like my first real job. This is going to sound ridiculous to anyone else who's just been at other places and seen organizations kind of like go through their cycles. But when we had to do a first really major reorganization, and also, reduction in force, like I was it felt so traumatic, I guess. Um, the part of it is these really deep relationships across the organization. Like, um, we were hundreds of people, and I knew everyone by name, like, and you knew something about them all, or in a way, you were probably part of almost like a bunch of their interviews and all this stuff, to like bringing them in, right? And I just always had felt like, a decision to work somewhere, it's both an individual decision in a way, it's also like that family's decision to stand behind and support that. And it meant a lot to us, that folks had chosen to, take a bet on us, basically, ride the journey with us, and had lent their talents and, to contribute to that. And so I think I just felt very deeply, like, personally responsible. I'm actually like, I do this. Oh, sorry, I should warn you. I
Oh, no
get
worries.
about this.
Yeah,
It's also something I've learned as a leader. I used to, like, hate this, and I'd try to hide it, but then I had actually no control over it. So,
yeah.
um,
It's a hard
Um,
thing to talk about, and like you say, it's a difficult period, definitely.
yeah, and it's never, even if you've had to do it then more than once, it sucks every single time. So I think, and it felt, I think I took it very deeply personally that I
Yeah.
didn't, you ask yourself, well, what more could you have done or foreseen or changed course like early on to have avoided needing to take the organization through those unpleasant steps. That was kind of part of the challenge. I think also in a restructure kind of situation, there are different ways you can restructure. So, we were debating like what was the right, are you going to be a functional organization, a matrixed organization, a business unit type organization, and those also have different versions in which how you might stitch them together, and they have different trade-offs. And it was a very impassioned set of arguments for a a lot of debate, over that. And I think like at some point you sort of realize like there has to be one key decision maker that maybe makes the call or breaks the tie across, the organization, and sometimes that's not you. But you take every decision, especially with this, as a co-founder, and almost even without that title, you just act as though you are owner, of the organization and deeply invested in its like in its success. So yeah, you were like, it's like, am I gonna fight and die on this hill like for this thing, and I
Yeah.
think like seeing that things kind of go through their cycle, nothing's ever one and done and forever set in stone. That these most of these things which decisions are really and actions are one-way doors versus like two-way doors that you can kind of change course on again later. Is like most of them are two-way doors, but I just felt I didn't know that until I had to kind of come out the other side of all of that, these impassioned debates, that, kind of getting through the change curve with the organization, taking care of the folks we had to say goodbye to.
Um,
And then just knowing that like, um, it was gonna be more about how do you help people on their way for maybe what would come for them next? How do you help the team that's you focus on, what needs to be done now and what needs to be done differently? And, I think trying to be as true to your word as you can. So, and then there'll be something else that comes up, like, later that you can't anticipate. So it was just like, maybe, I don't know, a false sense of, like, control or the ability to control more than I really, like, reasonably could. So I think a good
um,
lesson also from all of that was to you can have, like, firm, views, but just kind of hold everything a little bit more lightly, and I think it would allow just, like, a more lucid, um, view on everyday matters rather than maybe a more deeply, like, emotional view on everyday matters. So, I think that was really valuable to kinda go through, and like I said, anyone who's probably been at any other organization and sort of lived through that just knows that, like, yeah, like, you'll live to see another day, and
yeah,
it'll have its own cycle again, and it may come back around again, and I think I just needed to go through that a first time. But
yeah,
again, when maybe your organization, it felt like, um, it was like a personal failure that we had to go through that. That's how I had viewed it at first, and I
yeah.
felt a sense of responsibility around that.
I can imagine though that I mean I've never been through that personally, but I can imagine that particularly the first time you do that and when it's your business, or you founded or co-founded the business, like yeah, it must be really hard not to take that personally. Like I can't, yeah, imagine how you would. And I suppose it's one of those things that people naturally get almost, it sounds horrible, but almost desensitized to it over time when people have to do it over and over again. I imagine that would come, but particularly for the first time, it must be horrific. And I do think there's maybe not enough talk around trauma at work essentially in these sort of situations. Because I mean, I've been in a situation that was, it was traumatic, and I didn't dare say that afterwards because I felt like it's a work situation. How can it be? But actually, I think it's all right to say that.
Yeah.
Actually, So
Yeah,
yeah, because
I
it does
absolutely
affect
think
the
so.
person. Yeah,
Well, thank you for being the first to say it out loud, like on the record here, right? No, it's
yeah,
absolutely true. I mean, I think
yeah,
um, it's important that, like, I think as leaders, you can hold these seemingly contradicting views simultaneously. And that is, on the one hand, in this situation, that yes, it is a business.
mm,
Um, you do have both like there's like a financial or sort of an economic um driver. You have to be financially sustainable, in
yeah,
order
sure.
to persist on and in realizing your mission. Um, and that at the same time, you can deeply care that there are people in their lives who are impacted, who are a part of that journey with you at any point in time. And so those things aren't like mutually exclusive. That it is an enterprise, but there's humans are at the heart of it. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, and, it's one of those, isn't it, that I'm sure it's I think it's okay to care. I'm sure it is. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And you decide and have to go back and think, would you have done anything differently, or do you think it's just the case that you did what you could at the time with the knowledge that you had and that it was your first experience? I mean, I don't know what you think to that.
Yeah. Um, I think that's true. To as common as that saying is, it is common because it's just the truth. Like, and I think in a way, um, a lot of people can tell you things, through the lessons that they've learned, but a lot of things are hard to fully comprehend until you experience and process them yourself. Because
Yeah.
it's just sort of like an academic concept. And unfortunately, I think that will be true of what I just even said about the disinformation stuff. It's like, I shall warn you as best as I can, but until it hits you, it's like it's almost like whatever, like stages of grieving. Like, you just have to get through the stages. Well, maybe
Yeah,
go through them at different paces, but I can't sort of just tell you this and you jump to the very end of that path. Uh, so I do think that eh, I don't know, it was like maybe like a journey we all kind of needed to like walk through the fire on a little bit. Yeah.
that's it. Yeah, you just have to go with it, just take it day by day, I imagine, and like you say, it'd be great to press a button and jump to the end of that, that period, but yeah,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
possible, really.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. But getting through it, it was just talking to others who'd gone through that experience to hear, how they saw it or how they processed it, or maybe how it was different through different events that they had gone through, and reading just things that were, then help you kind of center and just renew sort of like purpose and all that kind of, I don't know, foundational self work, I guess. So that was also really, an unexpected, I guess, like a blessing from some of that hardship. Yeah.
well, thank you so much for sharing, because I know it's, yeah, not an easy thing to talk about, but it's also great for people to, to hear and understand and get your perspective. So yeah, I do really thank you for sharing that. Let's just talk about, just before we finish, because we are nearly finished. Just what does the future hold for Appeal over the next sort of 5 years? What do you see as the sort of the vision moving forward?
Yeah. So, a little bit, you alluded it earlier, while we have our greatest experience right now with avocados and citrus, hope to expand that to more categories because there are lots of other highly perishable categories out there. Everybody knows you can, for example, just bring berries home and, before they even get home, they may already be starting to mold and the whole basket's done. So,
Um,
there's more produce to rescue. um, what's exciting is, we're expanding beyond really just thinking about these protective coatings, but alternatives to traditional pesticides. So can there other be plant-based solutions that kind of, let's say, like, replace some of those harsher legacy chemistries? So that's an exciting thing that we're exploring, and something we haven't talked as much about, but It's really like a digitization of the fresh produce supply chain and the information within it. So in developing our own like plant-based formulations, the coating products, we had to develop our own tools kind of for measuring fruit quality, trying to figure out how to do that also more um, efficiently and non-destructively, because you don't actually think about it, but there's a lot of waste that's created by by destructive techniques required to do maybe a measurement of firmness on something, or to test the sugar and the ripeness levels of something.
Hmm.
And so at every inspection station, at every distributor or the retail store, all around the world, like that's happening. So we had really developed our own kind of quality tools and software to handle all that information and ultimately bring forward some predictive uh, capabilities. So, when would an avocado that was from this country of origin, harvested on this date with this kind of quality characteristics today, when might it be, ripe and ready to eat? And so if you kind of knew how much time you had in the supply chain, how could you sort of like optimize your supply chain and make sure you were delivering as much of that value to the consumer as you possibly could? So this has been sort of fun to think about both the software, the machine learning tools, and the hardware that goes together to bring more visibility for produce quality across the entire supply chain. Because often once it sort of leaves one node of the supply chain onto the next party, and sort of like forgotten. Is it kind of connected all the way across? Is there more value that can be again delivered to consumers, to stakeholders, and getting better tasting, higher quality, truly like peak freshness, peak at its season ripeness, quality for consumers. So
Nice, nice. Well, there's loads to come, and it's super exciting to hear what the future holds. But I mean, that's really everything for today. It's been really great to chat and hear your honest perspective, and just to hear how Apeel has grown, your background, obviously the highs and lows. I suppose if anybody does want to follow you and Apeel story, for example, on LinkedIn, or even reach out, are you happy for them to connect with you on LinkedIn?
yeah, yeah, please do, please do. Would love that. Yeah, it's just like a way to keep continuing these conversations. So thanks so much, Lucy, for creating a space to do that.
No worries. All right. Well, that's everything today. So thanks again. Thank you so much for joining us today.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Fruit, a podcast by LCR International. We are global experts in fresh produce executive search. Hit subscribe if you enjoyed this episode, and for more industry insights, connect with us on LinkedIn.